we have a few people who'd like to speak some words on behalf of, on Dad's behalf. And so my mom prepared a statement, but my wife Jeung is going to read that. And then my son Jackson, Dad's first grandson, would like to say a few words as well. So we'll go through a few prepared speeches, and then if anybody would like to come up, we'll leave the mic open. But we'll start now.
This is Arlene wrote this speech, and she asked me to repeat it on her behalf. We'd like to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate Richard's life. And a special thanks to Charles Fan, as he's here. He prepared the delicious food that we're enjoying. And we also would like to thank Joe and Pauline Yek and Mel and Musi for helping us organize the event today so that we can all be together. And Arlene wanted me to mention that if she forgot anyone, please know that she needs to say thank you. On behalf of the Jeung family, we appreciate everyone taking the time to be here for Richard. We know that there are people who traveled really far to be here, and we want to acknowledge that. We also want to acknowledge the heartfelt lovely letters and cards and little notes that were written to Arlene and to the family. It brought tears, but joy just to acknowledge how Richard has touched different people's lives. Rich was born December 22nd, 1949 at Chinese Hospital. He leaves behind his wife of 42 years, his son Brian, his wife, and his two kids, Jackson and Zoe. He and his newlywed son Rodney and his wife Jen. Richard also had an older sister, Betty, her husband Vincent, and their children, and his younger sister Susan, her husband Don, and their family, and lastly his younger brother Raymond, his wife Sandy, and their children. Rich grew up in Chinatown and went to Spring Valley Grammar School and then Hancock Grammar School, where he started to develop his lifelong friendship. We believe Wilson has the title of oldest friend of Richard's, over 40 plus years. Then he went on to Marina Middle School, where he started to develop his competitive skill for sports. Richard felt that his way through sports really developed skill sets for life. And I'm sure it was through his ability from sports that he learned early on his skill to read people and his knack to talk trash. In order to earn money, Richard was given a paper route, and he was given the worst route ever because he had the downtown area, which was hard because there were office buildings, and back then collecting money was difficult. And if you were a paper boy and you didn't collect money, that came out of your payment. Richard appreciated and admired his dad, who taught him early on, in order to get ahead in life, you have to study hard and work hard. Rich remembered how hard his father worked to operate the Manor restaurant, which is a family-owned restaurant in West Portal. Rich would sometimes go to the market early on in the morning with his father to buy fresh vegetables, fruits, and other necessities needed for the restaurant. Back then, they did not have walk-in refrigeration, so his dad was up at the restaurant before 8 and would not get home until 10 or 11 at night. It was through his mom and dad, their hard work, to give their children a better life. Richard went to Lowell High School, where he played competitive lightweight division basketball. That was for those who between the weight of 115 to 120. It was in his senior year that the team made it to the finals, only to lose to Polytechnic High. We know why he just loves the Warriors. If only he was a little taller, he felt he could have been competitive too. And then Arlene wrote, ha ha. Rich was into all kinds of sports. He wasn't playing basketball, he was playing tennis until he was derailed by a knee injury. He also did one-day ski trips with friends. You would go with groups of people, you would rent one hotel room, and it'd be 10 or 15 people crammed into the small space. And to him, that was the good old days. Because Rich had injured his knee playing tennis, he needed knee surgery, and he realized he needed to play another sport. And this is why he developed his love for the game of golf. Richard graduated from Berkeley and went on to USF Law School. He worked as an attorney for over 40 plus years before he was forced into retirement. We all know how much Rich loved the game of golf. We also knew how passionate he became with the game of golf. There were golf magazines, golf books, golf TV, golf shows. I don't know how many golf school or lessons he's gone through, but he finally came to realize learning someone else's skill set wasn't always the best for him. You may not realize it, but Rich did work very hard. There were times when he was running between San Francisco and Oakland to do his immigration cases. He sometimes would have no time in between to eat. So Lake Merced became his haven to retreat and distress from the grim of everyday life. Like his father, he did work hard, but unlike his father, Richard learned to take the time to relax, to de-stress, and enjoy himself. Lake Merced was Rich's second home. He enjoyed the game of golf, but most importantly, he enjoyed the people there. He loved to organize games, participate in the organization, but heaven forbid he was going to be on the board. Richard was a people person. He always liked to get people together to enjoy themselves through the game of golf. He loved to cook, and he always threw game parties at his house. It was through these game parties that he developed his lifelong friends. From the 49ers in the 80s to 90s, the Giants in the 2000s, and his beloved Warriors in the last few years. It was a great way for people to reconnect together and enjoy the games with food and most importantly with each other. Rich could be seen at the club, and he always had his dogs with him. Arnie was his best friend, but Riley was the one who truly took care of him. When Rich was diagnosed with cancer, Rich, being Rich, just kicked himself into planning and attending to his affairs. He never felt sorry for himself. I'm sure you all know that Arlene reacted with shock when she heard Rich's news. She was in disbelief, and she suffered another episode where she had temporal amnesia. We laugh about it then because Rich's diagnosis with cancer, and she was the one who ended up in the hospital. Her reaction was, "No way do you have it." After a day, she gained her memory back, and they both kicked into survival mode. If it wasn't for Joe and Maria Fing encouraging Rich to get a second opinion and making up the follow-up appointment at UCSF, Rich would have been treated with the wrong medication. So thank you, Maria and Joe Fing, for all your support through the years. Rich was diagnosed with stage 4 inoperable cancer, but was later diagnosed with that rare 3% type of cancer called neuroendocrine pancreatic cancer, which was a rare, slow-growing type of cancer, and Rich went through 3 clinical trials. The first trial was nationwide, and within a year, Rich was the last man standing. The treatment has now become a standard treatment for this type of cancer. The second clinical trial was Rich became immediately sick, and only after 2 or 3 infusions they elected to stop because the clinical trial wasn't working. And the third trial involved taking 2 chemotherapy pills, and it was able to cut down his tumor by a third, but it took a toll on his ability for daily activities, left him weak, depressed, and he elected to stop to regroup his energy. Through all these clinical trials, Richard stayed positive and strong. He always had some degree of pain and was on heavy opiates. Just being able to walk his dogs and enjoying going out to dinner with friends, simple things that we take for granted, was very difficult for him. When Rich became depressed, he always reminded me that he didn't want to endure being on a feeding tube or some sort of nursing home. He was a planner, and he was even looking into end-of-life stages, but thank goodness we didn't have to go that route. It was 2 days before his last birthday that Richard suffered a freak accident where he lost his footing and fell on his head. We had an angel watching over us because the first responder in this remote area was able to get Rich to a trauma center. He did suffer 3 fractures, 2 to the skull and 1 to the inner ear. He was in intensive care and Kaiser rehab for over 22 days. He claims he doesn't remember the accident, but was just as well because he was an awful patient. He had to be restrained. He had to have a 24-hour babysitter because they didn't want Rich to get out of bed or to pull out his IV. After the discharge, Rich endured many doctor's visits and outside rehab. Through all of this that Richard endured, he could not have done it without his village of people who kept encouraging him to keep on going. So again, we want to thank you for everyone to come out, playing a round of golf with him, taking him out to lunch or dinners, or even bringing food to him. He enjoyed the company of friends who came to these games at his house and the little trips that he was able to tolerate. Richard's tumor had grown extremely large, and now his liver tumors were growing much faster. It became apparent that his cancer was accelerating at a fast rate, and managing the pain became a priority. Rich was excited when his son Ronnie became engaged, but he wasn't sure if he would make it to see his son get married. We're glad to report Richard was happy to witness Rod and Jeng's wedding, because there was a time when he felt he wasn't sure. Rich wasn't eating and wasn't eating a lot of weight, but we chose not to endure another clinical trial. Instead, Rich opted for hospice care, and through all the pain and suffering he endured, his mind was still clear and sharp. He had some sense of humor, but Rich was not able to eat or keep his strength up, and the pain became too much to endure. Richard was on a morphine drip no less than 24 hours before God decided he had endured enough. He was surrounded by his family, his friends, and more importantly, his dog Riley by his side. Rich would tell you, "Home at last, do not cry for me. All the pain and grief have passed. I am at the side of Jesus at peace forever, home at last." Okay, so Richard's grandson Jackson would like to say a few words.
Thank you everyone for coming to Grandpa's funeral. This means a lot to him and to me too that he has passed away. I will share you a few words about him, in my opinion. Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you, Grandpa, for playing baseball with me, period. Even in the times that could have been, he watches us from above. He will always remember his spirit and how he made that simple for us, and how he made good memories with us. We will miss him, but we will never forget him, and he will never forget us. Sincerely, Jackson. That's Uncle Wilson.
Uncle Wilson?
Good afternoon. My name is Wilson Lim. I prepared something to tell you about Jeung as we grew up together in North Beach. By the way, Jeung and Arlene, that was an extraordinary account of his life. I didn't know he had a paper route. I had one too, but I had one worse. It was actually in the Tenderloin. And in the federal office buildings down in the Tenderloin. It was pretty nasty, but I never ran into Rich, but I guess we were cut from the same cloth or whatever. We're here today to honor and remember our good friend Richard Jeung. I'm sure amongst everyone here, they have their own stories about Rich. I'd like to share some of mine with you. I first met Rich back in the 1950s when we were both school kids growing up in North Beach. We lived a few blocks away from each other and attended John Hancock Grammar School on Filbert Street. We came from similar backgrounds, as both our families had immigrated to the U.S. and we were the second generation of Chinese Americans. As you might guess, our immigrant parents placed a high value on doing well in school with the hope of getting ahead. Richard's mom used to call my mom, sometimes looking for him, and other times telling my mom that she felt she was glad Rich and I were good friends because she thought I was a good student. And this might have rubbed off on him. I really don't remember a lot from this time, but I do remember he used to call me up to get answers to the math homework. Even then, even though he wasn't good at arithmetic, I felt that he had things figured out pretty well. We quickly became fast friends. Years later in high school, we both played basketball together. We were both starters on the Lowell High School basketball team with Mike Gerverts, whose family had been members here at Lake Merced for many years. Rich was really a great athlete, and he made the all-star team in our election. In fact, our team did better than the varsity. We made it to the finals, but lost to a much stronger and more talented team from Poly, as Jeung mentioned earlier. Although we couldn't close out the game, I'll always remember that Jeung, as we called him, we called each other by our last name. It's kind of a Chinese thing. He's really a tenacious guy. I remember one game during the season, some guy pulled a knife on him, because he played so well. They were so PO'd at him. And we were like 5'2", and I was 115, we might have been 105, dripping wet. But during the championship game, the thing I remember most is that he dove for a ball, he tackled a big kid to get the ball, sort of like a Draymond Green. I remember thinking that Rich was such a flat-out tenacious and fearless competitor. I mean, he's been that way his whole life. At Berkeley, we were college roommates, although he was disappointed in that I wasn't at the apartment more often. I was visiting my girlfriend in San Francisco a lot on my Honda motorcycle. Our mothers probably wouldn't have approved of that, since I bought it with money that I borrowed from Richard. Unbeknownst to my parents, not only that, I stored the motorcycle in his garage. This is a funny story, but true. Rich had decided one day to take the motorcycle out for a ride, never having ridden a motorcycle before. I'm sure he was thinking, I'm all city, how hard can it be? The result was rather predictable. He started the bike and promptly lost control of it, rammed it into the car parked across the street. When he confessed this unfortunate episode to me, what did I say? He had paid for the bike. In college, we were both able to avoid the Vietnam draft. I was really lucky. I had a high draft number. It was 269. Rich, however, was not so lucky. He had a low number. I think I recall it being about 60. But somehow that guy got out because he had flat feet. What a charmed life this guy had. After college, Jeung went on to USF Law School. I went to medical school, but we kept in touch. In 1975, he told me he was getting married to Arlene and wanted me to be his best man. Of course, I agreed and was honored that he had asked me. What I did anticipate was that he also wanted me and Vivian, my wife, as well as another couple to join him on his honeymoon in Carmel. I said, wow, he really likes us. We had a great time on his honeymoon, although I never really asked Arlene if she thought this was such a good idea. This is when I realized first that Rich loved to have his friends around, and that continued throughout the rest of his life. In the ensuing years, while we were both occupied in our professional lives and raising our families, we would see each other perhaps less often, although we only lived a few blocks from each other. In our circle of friends, though, Rich was always the guy who would organize get-togethers at his house. I can't tell you how many New Year's Eve parties, Super Bowl celebrations, more recently Warrior games and San Francisco Giants games that we spent at his house at Jordan. No one would ever make plans for New Year's Eve because we'd all be waiting to hear from Rich about his party, because we always expected to go to Rich's house to have a party. These gatherings over time included an eclectic group of people from his ever-growing circle of friends, from his professional life, his late Merced golf buddies, and of course his childhood friends. I always looked forward to these gatherings, and Rich was always the glue. He really was the glue that held the circle of friends together. He was never happier than he was when he was barbecuing something delicious for his friends to eat. Fast forward to December 2010. I got a phone call from Rich informing me that he had been diagnosed with cancer and given only a few months to live, and that he wanted to throw a New Year's party for the gang. In typical Jeung fashion, he wanted his friends around him to share this moment with him, devastating as it was for him, his family, and everyone else in his circle of friends. I mean, who does this? Who would have the energy or will to even get together with people who, and you can just been diagnosed with a life-changing medical problem? Then again, who invites his friends on his honeymoon? Rich just wanted his friends around and his dogs around. In the last 6.5 years, I've had the pleasure of spending more time with Rich and Arlene. An informal travel group was formed, and we made a number of trips with Rich and Arlene, going to faraway places on his bucket list, including Hong Kong, Thailand, France, Italy, and a number of destinations in the US. We did it for Rich and Arlene, but honestly, we also did it for ourselves, because we knew the special friend we cared about so much would not be around forever. We loved the camaraderie and the family of friends he created. I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Arlene, who's always been Rich's rock. I know things weren't easy for her, but she was the one who was always there to provide comfort and reassurance when his friends weren't. Since his passing, I've had a lot of time to think about what a very special person Rich has been in my life. I can't believe how much I miss him. If he's looking down on this gathering, I'm sure he'd be pleased that his family and friends were all here to remember him. I don't think he'd have it any other way. Rich, thanks for the memories. We love you.